Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, how are you all this afternoon? Excellent. How was that show? My name is Eric Ting. I'm the Associate Artistic Director here at Long Wharf Theater. And I'm here to welcome you to our Sunday Symposium, brought to you in part by the Connecticut Humanities for the Arts. I should be waiting. Are we on? Are we? Oh, they're putting us on tape. So, hello, and hello. I wanted to introduce you to my guest today, Barry Nalebuff. I'm going to read his bio. You all have this inserted in your program, but just for the record, I'm going to put this out into the world, and it'll give you a little sense of why we're really excited and thrilled and really honored, actually, to have Barry with us here today. Barry is Milton Steinbach Professor at Yale School of Management, where he teaches negotiation, innovation, and game theory. He is the co-author of 6 books. Along with being a professor, Barry, together with his former student Seth Goldman, co-founded Honest Tea, a company that sells ready-to-drink iced tea that tastes like tea. It has grown organically to over $100 million in sales. In 2011, Coca-Cola purchased the company. Barry also advises the NBA in their negotiations with the National Basketball Players Association and serves on the board of Nationwide Insurance. A graduate of MIT, Rhodes Scholar, and Junior Fellow at Harvard Society of Fellows, Nalebuff earned his doctorate at Oxford University. So join me in welcoming Barry to the theater. Now, those of you know that we have these Sunday Symposiums. When we do these Sunday Symposiums, we look for guests, we look for panelists whose experience intersects in intriguing ways with the play that you all have just seen. Sometimes it's more obvious, like we get the playwright, and sometimes a little less obvious. I think one of the things that we have been really struck by, you'll pardon the jest, but one of the things that we've been really struck by is that there's lots of forms of genius represented on stage in Steve Martin's play, but we do think that the one person who gets a bit of the short shrift is Schmendeman. And so when we were thinking about potential guests for this symposium,
you look for Schmendeman. Thank you. Asbestos.
I think I realized I was digging myself a hole as I started into that. Let me just give you all a little bit of really quick background about the play, and then I'm going to start with a couple questions. I'm going to throw a couple questions various way. We'll chat for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to open it up to you all for some Q&A. But just a little bit of background about the play. How many of you saw Underpants here at Long Wharf last season? Great, so many of you. I hope you were fans of that as well. That actually was Steve Martin's second play. Picasso Lapin Agile is Steve Martin's first play. It premiered in 1993 at the Steppenwolf Theater Company in Chicago, Illinois. And it's gone on to a very rich life, produced all across the country in multiple productions. The story as it goes is something like how Picasso landed here on Long Wharf's main stage is that last season our production of Underpants was a co-production with Hartford Stage. And after it closed here at Long Wharf, it moved up to Hartford. And in the course of its run, Gordon got word that the playwright, the author himself, would be in the house in Hartford. So he hopped in his car and sped up to Hartford. He settled himself down on the far side of the house. And he spent the entire performance watching Steve Martin watch the production. It was a great success. Steve Martin found Gordon in the back in the dressing rooms afterwards, told him how much he loved it, and basically said, you must direct my first play. And Gordon, of course, said yes, and so here we are today. The play poses a fictional encounter between Pablo Picasso and Albert Einstein early in their lives. Picasso would have been 23 and Einstein would have been 25 in a bar in the Montmartre in Paris in 1904, the Lapin Agile. And I think, as Steve Martin has talked about it, he intended to write a play about Picasso. He was reading, there were a couple biographies in particular that he was really fascinated with. He was really drawn to this person, and perhaps we'll get a little bit on into some information about Steve Martin himself that will give you a sense of where this all comes from. But he was really fascinated with Picasso, wanted to write a play about Picasso, sat down in front of his typewriter, started in about a page and a half into the writing. In walks Albert Einstein, and the rest, as they say, is history.
But you need, first off, any joke or any story has to be a group of 3.
Yes.
And so you can't just have 2. And Also, for this play is a little reminiscent of travesties. So you have Henry Carfigure telling the story of the meeting of Lenin, Tristan Tzara, and let's see, the third. Oh my.
Oh, I'm blanking on it too.
We'll come back to that.
Yes. Did you all see Travesties here? This must have been like the beginning of this is like 11 seasons ago. It was
James Joyce.
James Joyce. It was Sam Waterston's first production at Long Wharf. Wait. Nobody? Oh, you're all new. I love them. Some of you. All right. Very good.
And so that idea of the three geniuses coming together, and of course it's really an interesting choice to have Elvis Presley put on the same stage, and then you think about it, you want to have an American, and then the question is, which American would you pick?
Yeah.
And is there some choice other than Elvis? It's not clear.
Yeah. Well, what do you? I mean, can I ask this question? This is a great segue into two questions that I asked for you. One is actually, maybe the better place to start is this, which is, how would you define genius?
The ability to put ideas together that people haven't seen in the past, that in hindsight all make sense, but at the time nobody was able to understand before. It was a little bit of standing on the shoulders of giants, but it's also this concept of creating something that's both new but isn't entirely new, in the sense that it's a recombination, a different interpretation of ways we've doing things in the past. And when it works, everybody says, well, okay, I see that now, but I don't know how I would have got to that the time before.
Right.
And actually, I'll even beat up a little bit on Steve Martin in this particular case, because it's an example of Einstein's genius. So in the play, Einstein blurts out the speed of light, and kind of gives away the punchline to his book. It turns out that, in fact, Einstein did not invent the speed of light, or was the first to calculate it. That was done in 1676 by a guy named Olaf Romer, and then by Albert Michelson, a naval instructor in the 1800s. Albert Michelson was actually a Jew from the West Coast, was appointed to the Naval Academy so that I believe Ulysses Grant could get more votes for the Jews, and won the Nobel Prize for calculating the speed of light. Now what Einstein did that truly is genius is this notion the speed of light doesn't depend on your frame of reference. And so that if you shine a flashlight from a train that's going 60 miles an hour, the speed of light isn't c plus 60, it's 60. And if you shine a light backwards from the caboose, you might think if you throw a baseball off the back of the caboose, it's going to go slower, because it's going to take into account the speed of the train. When you shine a flashlight from the back of the train, it's still going at the speed of light. And so this notion, which just seems crazy and impossible, that you can't change the speed of light by going faster or going in reverse, that is something that's changed the way we see the world. I think the punchline could have been E equals mc squared. Another one of Einstein's unbelievable insights that works, I think, as a punchline, as opposed to the idea of the frame of reference is irrelevant.
Sure. No, it's great. I mean, I think that idea of relativity is something that Martin plays with quite a bit in his play. Then, can I ask you then? So, thank you for that. That's fantastic. We've been really intrigued in our conversations with audiences over the last few weeks. You know, in particular, we talked a lot about perception, about sort of like this idea that genius on some level is how we see things, or how, I think you put it eloquently in terms of sort of the different things that we are absorbing and collecting suddenly all of a sudden coming together into a sort of piece and into a kind of moment of clarity. Which I love is this idea of that image of the stroke of genius, that genius is actually in a way also tied to time, like it's an instantaneous moment as opposed to something that is a constant state. But then, why do you think Steve Martin chose Elvis Presley as the third leg of the triangle? Or do you?
Well, I certainly think Presley's genius was not in the same category as the other two. Let's be clear of that.
There's agreement from the House.
So then the question is, who would you pick as a musical genius? Leonard Bernstein, perhaps, wouldn't make as funny a piece, I think. And so Elvis is funny, although interestingly, of course, his key line is the age of regret.
Yeah.
And that, so you've got we don't know Elvis as being serious in life, and yet he's done that in this particular case.
Right. Do you think also there's something, well, let me come back to this too, because I think I find there's something quite interesting, intriguing about this idea that, you know, the first two geniuses that we're introduced to, Picasso and Einstein, were introduced to early in their life, right? So Steve Martin has introduced us to these two young men before, on the verge of their discovery, right? On the verge of their revelation, on the verge of their stroke of genius. And then he throws Elvis Presley into the mix, and Elvis Presley, of course, comes to us as from the future, first of all. So he's sort of like whereas we're beginning here in the beginning of the century, Elvis Presley, in his way, represents the end of the century. He represents something that has changed quite a bit, that has gone from all this amazing, phenomenal potential to, as he puts it, as you said, a place of regret. There's something about looking backwards.
Of course, there is another, I think Schmenderman
Yes?
doesn't get his due because, in fact, asbestos truly was one of the amazing inventions, and it allowed fireproof buildings. And in fact, actually, we have a name that's remarkably close. The Swiss billionaire got the Yale honorary degree, who's now been convicted in Italy. It's Stefan Schmidheiny, which sounds a little bit like Schmenderman, is the asbestos billionaire. And so it was a pretty good invention, actually, on the scale of things, like saran wrap.
Yep. Well, I think Martin does this thing where he pokes a little bit of fun, of course. One of the things that he's dancing around, one of the ideas that he's dancing around, is this idea of populism, right, and commercialism. And sort of, so he's talking about, like, Picasso represents a transformation in the way that we see visual art, and Einstein represents a transformation in the way we understand science and the physical world. And then he has so he throws Schmenderman into the mix as a kind of, you think Schmenderman is supposed to be the third genius, right? He's set up that way, and then of course in comes Elvis Presley. And what's interesting about both Elvis and Schmenderman is that they represent a kind of, they represent a different kind of genius, it seems to me, right? So where we have art and science, I wonder how you take that. So if you have the age of...
You would have put Warhol then, if you want to do that, in the sense of commercializing art.
Right.
In many ways, Elvis did that, but Warhol did it more than anyone.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And it's interesting that, I guess, the Picasso line and the Elvis, in terms of taking the art of the Negro, I think Einstein can be immune from that critique. So that would be another reason to bring in Elvis in terms of connecting to Picasso.
Right. Are there moments like that? Are there other moments in the play that sort of, you've seen the play now a couple of times. Barry is a great fan of this theater, but he's also a great friend of this theater, but he's also a great fan of theater in general.
The line that the first time I saw the play, I didn't get at all, but I think I now have, is the joke about why is it funny when somebody says a pie in the shape of an E? And we have the long explanation in terms of it couldn't be a B, it couldn't be a C, little c, big C, how can you tell the difference? The P and the B would be upside down and so on. But what's funny about a pie in the shape of an E? And the first time, right over my head. But then, the second time I got it, and I realized explaining a joke could ruin it, but nonetheless, there are two transcendental numbers in mathematics. There actually is an infinite number, but two that stand out. Pi being a pi that you eat, and pi being pi, 3.14159, and E, a second transcendental number, 2.71828, the Euler's classic line, e to the I pi plus 1 equals 0. And so this notion of turning one transcendental number into the other and playing off with the double meaning of those two math symbols, I think is what makes that funny. But boy, you have to think about it.
I'm still thinking about it. It's true.
It's like the icebox thing. It took me this, a week later I got it.
Right. It's fascinating though when you talk about, like, I think there's something about the way that we look at things, right? And I'm interested. I've had the opportunity to hear you lecture, and it's really been some of the most inspiring and kind of just pleasurable sort of performances in a way. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, sort of this idea of innovation, this idea of how genius, like what is about the way these individuals think?
Well, I'll give you one example, and we can even do a little bit with the audience in this regard. I have a book called Why Not, and the goal of this is to mechanize creativity, as opposed to having to be a genius to say, how can you formulaically come up with new ideas? And one trick that is done is to take a concept and turn it on its head, to flip it. And that is used a lot in humor, and we saw that in the play. There's, right in the beginning, it's I woke up feeling great, and there's nothing I can do about it. Or you have the woman who's all in adoration, and you realize she's in adoration for Schmenderman, not for Einstein. And so, again, it's sort of the flip of what it was you were expecting. You had the flip in terms of, so what do you see, Einstein? Which is the literal, here was used literally, but we typically use it figuratively. So that idea of taking a traditional thing and giving us the opposite of it. So one tool that I would use is to say, okay, let's take a classic ad, Lay's potato chips. Bet you can't eat just one. Right? You've heard of that? Mm-hmm. Okay, if you were to flip it, what would be the flip for the ad? This isn't supposed to be hard.
Eat all you want.
You get to change one word to flip it. So bet you cannot eat just one?
But you can.
Bet you can eat just one. Okay, so now your job is to design a potato chip where the slogan of that potato chip is bet you can eat just one. Okay, so what would it be? And I'll repeat it after you say it. A big chip. The world's biggest potato chip. Okay? What else?
Terrible tasting.
Terrible tasting chip. Or to play on that a little bit more, maybe a really spicy potato chip. So, sort of a contest. Can you really finish that chip?
Really ugly.
I'm sorry?
Ugly.
A really ugly potato chip. Okay? Why would it be a good thing to only eat one potato chip? Weight. Exactly. And so we like potato chips, but we don't like getting fat. And so that suggests, how about the individually wrapped potato chip? One per box. And the reality is, if you think about what's the biggest innovation in snack food, it is the portion control pack, where they charge you a huge amount to get fewer potato chips. But they limit you to 100 calories. And so we think X is a good idea, but what if we tried it the other way? So, okay, you have life insurance. The flip of that would be death insurance. Now, in reality, death insurance is life insurance, because, so what's the flip of that? What would be the insurance? What should true life insurance be?
Living insurance.
Living insurance is basically protecting you against living too long. Okay? And you laugh about that. By the way, Einstein said that if an idea doesn't seem completely ridiculous at first, there's no hope for it. So I like to hear humor, I like to hear laughter, but that idea that you could have protection against living too long, well, we think of insurance as protecting against bad things, but actually good things too. So you could save to age 80, but if you live past 80, now this insurance would kick in and give you a monthly income. And the reality is that it's kind of hard to plan how long you should save for retirement. And so this could be a great product. Okay? So that idea of you see X, what if we tried it the other way, I think works for creating jokes, and it works for creating products. It is a particularly valuable tool, and hopefully you'll be able to use it. And give me 5%.
Let me ask this question. You know, we've talked a lot in this theater also about Picasso and Einstein representing representing in terms of the century, the 20th century, the age of aesthetic, and the age of science and technology. Do you have a sense of, like, if I were to say, what would you name this new era? What would this age be? Like, what if you were here? We are at the beginning of the 21st century. You know, what do we have to look forward to?
Yeah, not look forward to, but anyway, look, big data. Essentially, whether it be data about ourselves in terms of the human genome, in terms of interconnectivity, of the ability to communicate, to be able to share, to be able to analyze. So I don't know if this will be the century of data, but I think it will be the decade, at least, of data.
Great, great. So like the age of information then. Although we've had that, I guess.
Yeah, so this is now beginning to understand
Right.
information. And so we haven't necessarily been able to cure all sorts of diseases, but we're able to diagnose things in ways that we never could in the past.
Right.
And at least understand what's causing it, even if you don't know how to fix it.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. We're going to start opening up to questions. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. Elizabeth over here has a microphone, and she'll come find you with the microphone.
In the meantime, I'm just going to give you one or two other just quick
Yes,
comments about the
please.
play. So I was wondering what the Lapin Agile was all about. And we think of Harry's Bar, and what is this place? And it turns out that it was originally called Café des Assassins, because apparently some ruffians came in and murdered the kid, the son of the owner. And then the sign, which was a rabbit coming out of a saucepan, was painted by a very famous artist named André Gilles, and the name was Lapin Agile. That is Gilles' rabbit. But if you say Lapin Agile quickly, it becomes the agile rabbit. And so it went from Lapin Agile to Lapin Agile. And so it's a little bit like Pennsylvania Dutch country, right? You're wondering where are all the windmills in Pennsylvania? You know why it's called Pennsylvania Dutch? It's Pennsylvania Deutsch, and we just can't pronounce it. And so I think this is another one of those cases where the quickness of the two double, maybe itself it's just a double entendre. And so that to me I thought was quite amusing. And then the other thing is, why is, I always struggle, Schmenderman?
Schmendeman. Yes.
Schmenderman, why is that such a funny name? Because we kind of laugh every time we hear it. And I think it's a combination of everything from their Yiddish expressions, from whether it be schmati or schmutz or schmendrick or schmo or schlamazel, all the things that will come out there. But it also reminded me of the joke about the different languages who are competing to see whose is the most attractive. And there's the Frenchman says, oh, look, we'll pick a word, butterfly. And in French it's papillon. And then the Israeli says, no, parpar, look how beautiful that is. And the Italian, farfar. And the Chinese, hutiao, hutiao, look how beautiful that is. And they go on and on, cho-cho in Japanese. And finally the German says, no, German's the best, Schmetterling. It's just, to me, I think that I hear Schmetterling, it's just funny.
Do you think there's anything to, so in the play, I mean, I think one thing that Steve Martin does, which is really kind of, for me, one of the things I love most about the play is, rather than simply populate the play with these geniuses, rather than sort of like gods amongst men, right? He includes the men. He includes the sort of the barmaid. The
barmaid is the wisest person in the room, of course.
Talk about that somewhere, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, she isn't fooled by anyone. She understands all the different motives. She's not, in some sense, playing games. I'm sorry, the woman in Pygmalion, Liza. So she sort of reminded me a little bit of that, and grounds the play. She's a terrific actress, and so it would not be the same without her.
Yeah, hers is a sort of human intelligence, or sort of human
Wise, wisdom.
Wisdom, absolutely. Any questions from the room? Yes, I see. So, yeah, keep your hands up, or so Elizabeth knows when to come to you with the microphone as we start with each question.
Of this century, the 21st, what do you think is the best or the greatest invention so far?
Saran wrap for the old one.
You mean of 21st, like since 2000 or of this? Oh, since like in the last 10 years? 15, yes, thank you. My bad, this is why I'm in the theater.
I think the human genome would have to be that in terms of really understanding what it is that we're made of. Of course, that combined with information technology allows us to go from doing this for several $1 million to now being able to do it for $1,000, and pretty soon we'll be able to have our iPhone be able to calculate our genome. In terms of making our individual lives better, I think the ability to just access information from anywhere, that is, having in some sense Google or some other source just be your external memory drive, so that you can remember stuff, or you don't have to remember stuff. It's going to change what it is that we do. People think of computers often as substitutes for what we are, but I like to think of them, taking that flip again, as complements, as helping us perform better and allowing us to do other things. So in the old days, people didn't write things down, we had to remember everything. And memory was intelligence was memory. Now memory is almost useless. And we can try and come up with other things to work for everybody. What's your name again?
That's great. Where is this next question?
In this age of information, where children, adults are on the internet, but how do we, just put it closer, okay? How do we know how accurate the information is? We don't have that memory or the skills to evaluate what we're reading. And I think it presents tremendous problems.
So you think it matters, is right now.
Well, accuracy.
Yes, no, I understand. I think the answer is there are some parts where you can go to multiple sources and you have a hope of finding it out correctly. I think cases where it may not be settled, so Wikipedia changes every 10 minutes, then perhaps we should appreciate there isn't necessarily one truth, or the truth hasn't been settled. I'm not sure all the old encyclopedias were always so accurate either. And so, but I may not have answered your question.
No, because the young child is going online.
Right.
They need certain skills to accurately assess the information that they're reading. And I don't see that being built into the system.
How do you train, sort of on some level you're asking, how does one train critical analysis of all of this information that is out there in the world, right?
Or how do you bring skepticism in?
How do you bring skepticism, right?
Appreciate that just because you read it doesn't mean that it's true, and just because I'm answering this question doesn't mean I'm right.
It's accurate.
Right, so I'd be skeptical of what I'm saying too. It's a great question. If I knew the answer, I'd be a genius.
I assume you know of the work of Gregory Bateson, because I am
A little closer to you.
Of Gregory.
Gregory Bateson.
I don't.
Oh, wow. Hey, terrific. Bateson says two things, or writes two things. The meaning of your communication is in the outcome, irrespective of your intentions. And the second half is that the meaning is determined by the recipient.
Okay.
I have found those two extremely useful. I don't obey them all at the time, but I think they're very, very useful and life-changing if people start to use it.
And it's very much connected to the special theory of relativity.
Fine, that's okay by me.
Because it's not context specific.
Whether it's the relationship between this beautiful woman on my right, right? But I found them extremely useful in my various lives, a psychologist, a rabbi, all that kind of thing. And they are powerful words which, if everyone started to act by them, I think.
And it also seems to apply to art, right? The beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Of the eye of the beholder, right? And if I want to change how you're feeling, I could go on and on and on and on. But I'll not do that.
And also interestingly enough brings us back to what you were talking about perception, about what I was sort of translating as perception, which is an idea is only as good as your ability to communicate that idea. That somebody can imagine a cubist image, but if they can't actually translate that idea to a canvas, then it doesn't ever really sort of communicate. It doesn't happen. It's sort of like the sound of the tree in the forest if there's no one there to hear it. In the back.
Hi, I hope this isn't a silly question. Did anyone else see where Elvis represented a genius that was being mocked? You had two clear geniuses with deep thoughts and fabulous discoveries, and then you had Elvis. Not that you don't love Elvis and not that his music wasn't fabulous, but as a third part to that triangle, our perception of what we thought was genius has changed a great deal. Instead it was, oh, he's famous and wonderful. That isn't what genius is. So I was wondering if anybody else saw that Elvis was kind of like mocking our choices. That would be you.
No, he'd be mocking us, not Elvis.
Yes,
in fact,
I
right?
was wondering if Steve Martin might be mocking us in the choices of Elvis, or somebody with that same caliber. Not to say that Elvis wasn't fabulous, but he certainly wasn't on the same level as the other two thinkers.
I have often longed for, we have art museums, but we generally don't have idea museums. And only recently in New York did they open up the Museum of Mathematics. So you get a sense of some of the geniuses that helped us understand the numerical world. So we have museums of rock and roll and art museums, but it is hard for us as a society to really appreciate mathematics and physics and science, partly because we gave it up so long ago. And there was a time when I was thinking I was going to be a mathematician and realized that if I were successful at this, maybe 3 people in the world would understand what I was doing. And that was somewhat a scary idea, that you'd be locked in a room and nobody else would really know what you had accomplished. It is hard for us as a society to appreciate these crazy things that people are doing.
And our value systems.
But but it's also interesting. I'm just sort of as a counterpoint. Einstein talks about that in this play. What you were just now saying, which is he really only needs an audience of 1, right? So Einstein says, "I need an audience of 1," and yet Elvis Presley, for what he represents, I've always felt that Presley is in the play more as representative of something as opposed to simply embodying a very specific.
He needed Max Planck to give him the seal of approval.
Right.
But then he needed many people. But once he got Planck, he'd get everyone. Is really the idea.
Exactly. And yet, though, I think it is safe to say that Einstein's genius is something that is not accessible to the masses in the same way that Elvis Presley's, whatever it was that Elvis Presley had, right? Which is, I think, one of the questions that the play presents, which is, what is the nature of genius? When we ask ourselves, what is genius a purely intellectual sort of phenomenon, or is there other ways perhaps to define genius?
And can you be a comic genius, which in many ways Steve Martin would be a contender if that category exists.
Yeah.
But is that a worthwhile endeavor to devote your life to making people laugh?
But how could you consider Elvis Presley the genius and editor?
Is he a genius? You could say, I'm sorry, you said, could you say?
Consider him a genius and editor.
Ask that question one more time.
How can you be considered a genius?
How could Elvis be considered
How
a
could
genius?
Elvis Presley ever be considered a genius in any terms? It's a good question. It's a good question. I imagine you're not alone in asking that question in this room. All right, we have a question there, and then we've got time for maybe 1 or 2 more. So we'll take this question, then we'll come over to you, ma'am, and then down to you, sir, for the last one.
Why is the stocking on the chandelier? And can you quickly define game theory?
Quickly define. Yeah, so you gave us a softball and then a really hard ball. So I'll give you the answer to the softball. I'll let you take the hard one. Which is the stocking is actually it's a motif of the set design.
In the bar.
It's of the set design. I think it's, you know, it gets a little bit of the craziness that happens in this bar late at night. All right, game theory, sir.
I need a little prep.
Okay, he needs a little prep. So, okay, yes.
Hi. I have a question and an idea of the idea of genius. We're only examining male geniuses. And I think that we really have to raise that issue of why didn't Steve include some female models?
Sure.
And while you said that the barmaid was the woman of wisdom, what I thought about that comment was, but she had no power. And she was not given power as the two main characters.
You said it was
of Einstein.
sexist. Doesn't matter where it comes from, right?
Oh, yeah, so the gentleman's comment in the back in response to what you were getting at, and actually, thank you very, very much for that. I mean, I think what you're bringing, of course, what you're bringing up is something that is very much in the popular consciousness right now. I'm merely reminded that the play was written, I'm reminding right now that the play was written in 1993. So
Well,
that's not really a good excuse.
I think there's a line when you're a hole, stop digging.
I know, it's fair enough, fair enough. I think that's a fantastic question. You know, I think that's
They mentioned Madame Curie, though.
they do. There is mention of genius, but it is fair to say that this play focuses primarily.
You actually had it indirectly too with radium, because that was one of the three ingredients along with kitten's paws.
Yep.
In the asbestos, and Madame Curie was the inventor or the discoverer of radium. So she does come in a little bit, but
Yeah.
I think it's totally a fair critique. But I think you have to ask Steve Martin that question.
Yes.
Well, I think if we raise the question, it's good enough. It's just so that we don't lose our perspective on the play and all of us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
So I'm now ready to answer the game theory question.
Oh, game theory question while Elizabeth works her way over to you.
So I thought I'd do the best explanation I can do of game theory is an experiment. And here's the experiment. I've written a number between 1 and 100 on this piece of paper. And your job is to guess the number. And if you get it right on the first time, it's worth $100. If you get it the second time, it's worth 80, then 60, then 40, then 20, and then 0. And we'll make it real, because you can't play experiments that aren't real. That's not a very challenge. I haven't really made the odds very favorable, because it's 100 numbers and 5 guesses. So your chance of success is 1 in 20, 5%. So to make it more interesting, each time I'll tell you if you're too high or too low. Okay, and who was the person who asked? So do you understand the game?
I think I do.
So,
Is it a multiple of 10?
no, you have to pick a number.
I
You can't,
pick one number?
but then each time I'll tell you if you're too high or too low.
Oh my God.
And like they do in, what is it, The Price is Right, you can phone a friend. Your folks can help you. So, do we have a first guess?
37.
Well, my friend over,
50.
50. 50 is too high. And keep going.
37.
I'm picking this.
25.
25. 25 is too low. Keep going.
38.
38. 38 is too low. Keep going.
47.
That's my friend in the
I'll take her number, 47.
47. 47 is too low. Now you have one last guess. But before you...
50 was too high.
50 is too high, 47 is too low, so you're getting close. But before you make the last guess, Eric can confirm the numbers I wrote on this page were 50, 25, 37, 43. So until that last guess, I was doing a pretty good job figuring out what you were doing. And essentially, what you were doing is the engineering solution of splitting the space in two and converging as quickly as possible, which is exactly the right strategy if the number were picked at random. But it wasn't picked at random. What is my objective? I like you, but I like me more. And my goal was to keep the money. And so I picked a number that was going to be particularly hard for you to guess, assuming that you took that engineering strategy. And so in game theory, you have to understand what the other person's objectives are in order for you to succeed. Okay, so now you understand a little bit better, and you know the number is less than 50 and above 47. So, with that in mind, my friend, you have one last guess.
49.
49. So, why 49? Because it's the last number that you get to, right? If you kept on doing that sequence. So, congratulations. Eric, would you read the number?
48!
That speech was designed to get you to pick 49. And my friends, it doesn't always work that well. That's game theory for you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I had two comments. One was I was fully expecting when they were bringing the third genius to be Freud, because he was so important. But he is a man also of ideas.
Yeah.
And I think Elvis Presley functioned as a flip. So you had to stop and say, what is it he did? And he did revolutionize music.
Yes, he did.
So if you wanted the woman, it would have been Martha Graham. I think could have been the example. And you also, I think, wanted an American for part of this.
Martha Graham wouldn't have been fun.
No, that's the problem.
That would be 49.
And we never got the fat Martha Graham either.
All things in service of the comedy. All right, sir, I promise you the last question.
Just a couple of comments. First about that joke.
ID joke?
The pie joke.
Okay.
The thing, it seems to say something about creativity and genius, because the question that was originally asked is, do you deliver pies?
Mm-hmm.
And then it took a different whole direction.
Sure.
So that a genius or a creative person asks a question, but is willing to go, well, to flip the question, to go beyond the question. That's one thing. The other thing is about Saran Wrap and Elvis Presley.
Okay.
The company, the chemicals that allow a plastic to cling to a jar also can create napalm.
Okay.
Therefore, the 20th century is a time of great discovery, but also of regret, because every discovery has the flip side
Well,
of
look,
being
go
misused.
Einstein and atomic bomb. I mean, you don't have to go through
Right,
Saran Wrap.
exactly. And at the end, we were just having a great time with a little dance up here with the Elvis dance. I can't dance to E equals MC square or to the woman descending a staircase of Picasso, but Elvis gets moving.
Yeah. You know, I think what's beautiful what you're saying, of course, and this is there's no right answer to this, and obviously certainly not from any of us here on stage, and probably any of you in the audience. That is finally the question for Steve Martin, as they say. But you know, in the conversation around why Elvis Presley, and the conversation around sort of what is the nature of genius, you know, I think there is finally this idea that where are we right now? We're in a theater. And in this theater, there is this active creation that is happening on stage. You know, an amazing company of actors on stage making you laugh, right? Speaking the words of a great artist, you know. And I think Barry was saying earlier that, you know, it's important to keep in mind that Steve Martin is one of the great Renaissance individuals of our time. That he is, you know, not only is he the sort of like famous for his stand-up,
his physical humor, but he is also an actor, a screenwriter, a novelist, a collector of fine art, and a pretty fantastic banjo player. Like he sort of tours with his banjo, and there is, I think, what he is getting at finally in the end is that, and this is what I think was always so interesting about Germain and about the sort of the more ordinary characters that surround these extraordinary individuals, right? Is that they remind us that there is this other thing there is this other thing, which is this sort of more, this human thing, right? That in all the conversations around all the transcendent
sort of thoughts and ideas of Picasso and Einstein, and any number of other individuals, men and women alike, that, that there is something fundamentally human about it. And there's something then in particular about this idea of entertainment that Elvis Presley brings into the room. You know, Picasso, Einstein, for all of their ingenuity and all of their advancements, were not necessarily the greatest entertainers. And he throws Elvis Presley into this room because he himself, Steve Martin, is an entertainer. And he's interested in acknowledging that relationship with you all, that you know, that Picasso perhaps made us see the world differently, and Einstein made us understand the world differently, that individuals like Steve Martin make us laugh at the world differently. And I think maybe we'll leave it at that. Barry, I want to thank you so very, very much.